So for this assignment, I chose to practice drawing animals because as an artist, I will admit that my weak points when it comes to drawing things are backgrounds, um, behind the characters, and animals. I've tried many times before, and drawing animals just really wasn't my strong suit, even when I just went with the ones that looked horrible and you couldn't even really tell what kind of animal it was. So here I'm starting with drawing pit bulls, since they're a basic type of dog, and dogs would probably be a good place to start when it comes to animals, since they're pretty simple and you can see them and put them in different scenes. So here I'm just using the reference image that I chose of this blue nose pit bull, and I'm just basically sketching out like how it's built, and so I could just kind of basically get the layout over the how the pit bull is going to be stationed, so I can just go from there and do the details and everything like that. So it was starting off good, and I had got through a lot of it, and I got the sketch down, so I was creating a new layer so that way I could start doing like the more fine details and the cleaner line drawings. And I'm not that experienced with line art or digital art that much because I really didn't have much to practice with besides like my hand and using IBS paint. And the current app I'm using right now is called Krita, and to be honest, I had no idea what I was doing with it. It was really hard to find a lot of the materials besides like maybe the paintbrush. I couldn't figure out where the colors were for a while, and it was just kind of stressing me out a little bit, but I tried to keep going. Here I'm doing the outline of the pit bull, the finer details, and just going from there. And it was going pretty good, and it was looking better than I expected it to, better than the last time I had drawn an animal. So I was getting a little bit more positive about it. And as I kept going, I noticed that it looked a little bit better, and I was just going to focus on like the big outline details that you can actually see in a photo, and not so much the shadows, the small details like the eyebrows and the wrinkles all too much. Another challenge that came to me while I was actually doing this was the fact that I was using a drawing board that Full Sail had provided instead of like the keyboard and mouse, because I feel like if I was to use like the mouse pad that's on the laptop, I would probably have not gotten even half this far. The lines would have been all messy, and even though I'm still struggling a lot with this, it's a lot easier than using the mouse pad. So it was just like a lot of new things that I was using in this, but I was willing to try and get better at regardless. The most problem I had for this first attempt was mostly like using the app itself, and like I could barely even see where I was drawing at most of the time. And if I swapped from the brush or went to go do anything else, tried to change the color, it just wouldn't change the color, or I changed the wrong thing. And I eventually started to get more discouraged while I was doing this attempt, even though I felt like the pit bull looked good. As you're gonna see in a second, when I take away the sketch layer, it doesn't look as great, and it just really didn't feel great. And I tried coloring it after this section, but I've never been strong with colors either, so I decided I was just gonna go with the sketch. And eventually I just got really frustrated, and I ended up scrapping this entire attempt, and I ended up moving on to try to find a new platform to use and a new attempt for the dog. Okay, so this is my second attempt, and now I'm going to be drawing this dog instead because unfortunately the file corrupted for the other dog and I wasn't able to recover it. But now I'm going to be retrying with this dog, just the same sketch and trying to do it as best as I can. And I will say for this sketch, I felt a lot more fluid with this program. I'm using Fesco with Adobe, and it's much smoother. I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with the drawing pad, and as you can see, I'm getting a lot more done a lot faster, and it looks a little better than it did the other time. While I was still discouraged about how it would come out looking, I was able to in my opinion get a much better product than I would with the other app. The reason I decided to start with dogs mostly is because I felt like it would be easier to implement into my drawings, and then once I got it down at least to a little bit, I would be able to practice drawing them more and just basically understanding like how their limbs work, what they look like, what certain dogs look like. And since pit bulls, in my opinion, are one of the most easiest ones to draw, that's why I chose this one. After taking the break that I took from the first one, I wasn't feeling too confident about this dog, and I honestly started to feel like it was coming out like many of my past dogs came out, which was looking a little too humanoid and not enough like a dog, but just enough like a dog that you could tell it is one. And while it isn't horrible, I still felt like I really needed to improve, especially if I wanted to be making my own shows and, you know, character art, especially because one of my stories include a dog in it that's probably going to be getting drawn a lot. So right here, as you can see, I'm mostly focusing on the face of the dog, since that's the most important part of the features that basically shows you that it's a dog rather than any other animal. Now that first eye, I felt like it looked good, but it still felt off. And obviously the face of the dog is way too lumpy, the roundness isn't at the right angle, and the proportions are all the way off, which I noticed, but just for the purpose of the attempt, I kept going and I tried to just push past it. Though the whole time I was talking about how bad it looked, I was still trying to be positive and just kind of go through it and get it done with. For this one, I decided to shade it in still because I felt like that added to who the dog was, and it would just give me a better comparison rather if I just left it blank with less detail, since I wasn't doing anything more than just a rough sketch with the dog mostly. So I decided to shade it in for this one, and as you can tell, it is drawn bigger and less proportion to the first one, which I notice I do a lot when I tend to use references for anything other than people. I tend to draw certain limbs or certain aspect ratios of things out of proportion, and it forces me to move other things over and adjust things that shouldn't be in the place that they are, and it kind of throws off the whole picture and makes things look too big or too small or things like that. So that's also something I know I need to work on. At this point, I was almost done with drawing the dog, and I was already critiquing my work inside my head, talking about how weird it looked. But I was also seeing the similarities of my previous drawings and seeing that I was still at that stage I was the last time I had drawn an animal, with as far as the face and how it looked. While the body doesn't look horrible, I feel like if the face of the animal looks strange, then it makes the whole rest of it look strange. And in the words of one of my friends, they said it kind of looks like a human dog. As you can see, like the face looks a little too human-like, the eyes and the cheekbones, and it just doesn't look enough like the puppy on the side image. So, and this draws the end of my second attempt. For this attempt, I decided to focus more on using geometry or shapes in order to map out the overall shape of the puppy. That way I can get like the basic shape down and then connect them through other lines and such like that. And by using this method, I was able to look at it more accurately, especially with the ears and seeing how the body lined up. With the legs, I was able to already have that mapped out, but not fully drawn. That way I didn't have to go back and erase as much. And already this method was working way better for me, because all I had to really do in order to get it to fit the puppy is just change the shape some more, and then basically plan out the rest of how I was going to draw it, and then tweak it as I go along if something doesn't look right. Thing I decided to save till like towards the end is the eyes, since the eyes always seem to come out the most weird when I do these images, but I felt like I did much better on the mouth of the face. It looks a lot more puppy-like, and compared to the first two dogs, obviously the first dog, but compared to the last dog I drew, the dog seemed a lot younger. It didn't seem as human-like, and the face seemed more to match the one on the side. Right here, as you can see, the legs weren't matching up, so I had to fix that and make sure that where the body came in towards the left ear, it also came in the same way, at least for that part of the body that I was on. And I drew the paw so where it was matching about the same length and direction as the one on the side. I also went as far as to also draw the little paw stubs, so that I could more accurately show the rest of the puppy than I did in the first one. And though it doesn't look the best, I still feel like it's a big step from the first one I drew, where you couldn't even see both paws. I have noticed though, when I do use references, the more closely it looks at the image, including the size, the better it seems to come out, and you can tell that I used it as a reference and not just like pretty much enlarged it or something like that. I was feeling a lot more positive about this attempt, and taking some of the notes from our lessons. I like when they said that if you try to pretend as if you were teaching somebody when you're trying to learn something at the same time, it helps. And I will say, when I was drawing this, I was basically just talking to myself out loud, saying, okay, now you gotta put this here. You made a mistake, but it's okay, keep going. You messed up, but it's alright. It's all about trying. You can do this over again. And basically I kept talking to myself like that, like a student talking to her teachers, and I honestly felt like I was more motivated. I was able to get it done quicker. I didn't let any negative thoughts come in and estray me, and I felt like the image came out much better, and I felt a lot more positive about this outcome than the previous ones. And as you can see, it looks a lot more like the puppy on the side now rather than the first one, and I feel like it looks almost cleaner too, since I didn't decide to enlarge it, and I also was able to focus more on details by starting with the shapes first. And this was my third attempt. Alright, so this is my fourth attempt, and this is the next day that I'm doing this one. And off the bat, since the last method worked for me, starting with the shapes and mapping everything out that way instead of just the overall shape of the dog, I went to go with that method again since it worked really well last time. And I'm doing it. This video is sped up, but I felt a lot more comfortable with the dog now, knowing that I can get the facial shape more. And while the face was coming out a lot smoother, I also felt like it was looking a lot more tilted to the dog. Even though the dog doesn't look as young as I wanted it to, I feel like I'm getting better on the details and being able to spot them easier and draw them faster. As you can see, I'm getting the overall shape of the ears and the dog's head down a lot quicker than I did last time. And this time I decided not to map out the entire body. That way that I could fix the proportions as I go rather than having to erase what I did beforehand. I will say that this time I'm very proud of how I did the eyes. Though they might not be facing the exact direction they are in the photo, I feel like they came out a lot better. They don't look as humanoid, and they still look kind of like really pretty compared to my previous ones. I will say that taking a break and starting over and just taking what you learned from the last attempt, and improving on it for the next attempt does definitely help. While this one I didn't use the whole do it as if you're teaching method, I did try to improve on what I did good last time and add more detail. For example, for the paw, you can see I added like the toe stubs, and I tried to make sure the nails were all there, and just overall keep what I had good last time but also improve on it this time. I ended up erasing the shading I just did, just because of the fact that I was going to do it all at the end, and I felt like that one was a little too dark. I did mess up a little bit on this arm just because the shape was kind of awkward for me. The way that it like curved in right at the like puppy elbow in that section. But eventually I got past it, and I feel like this one came out looking a lot more like a dog body more than my other ones, and it didn't feel as kind of like out of shape, out of proportion. The face I feel like definitely came out a lot better, and while it doesn't look necessarily like a puppy, it still looks like more like a dog, and it looks much more similar to the photo. And I was much more happy with this attempt than all my other ones, and I just felt like I improved a lot more from where I started.